I never believed in ghosts. I never thought there was anything beyond the physical world, no strange forces or supernatural entities. But after what happened to me, I don't know what to believe anymore. I've been trying to explain it, make sense of it, but no matter how much I try, I can't. The only thing I know for sure is that something was in my house, and it wasn't something I could see. It all started 2 months ago when I moved into my first apartment. I had been living with my parents for the last couple of years, trying to save up, and when I finally had enough money for a place of my own, I jumped at the opportunity. The apartment was small but charming, located in an old building just on the edge of town. The rent was reasonable, and the area was quiet, perfect for someone who worked late hours and preferred a little peace and solitude. The apartment itself wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. There were creaky floors, a musty smell that lingered in the air, and a thin layer of dust that I had to scrub away from the countertops, but it felt like home right away. Everything was fine for the first week. I was adjusting to living on my own, figuring out the best places to put my furniture, learning the ins and outs of my new space. I even started enjoying the solitude. My neighbors were distant, mostly quiet, and I rarely saw anyone, which suited me just fine. But then, on the night of the second week, I heard it. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep after a long shift at work. The city outside was silent, and the only sounds I could hear were the soft hum of my fridge and the distant sounds of traffic. It was peaceful, too peaceful. I had just started drifting off when I heard a faint whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, and it seemed to come from somewhere in the room. I sat up quickly, heart pounding in my chest, but the apartment was dark and still, and I couldn't see anything unusual. I told myself it was just the wind or my imagination, and I tried to go back to sleep. But then it happened again. This time I was sure I heard it. It was a soft voice, almost like a murmur coming from inside the walls. I froze. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't anyone I knew, and it wasn't coming from the street outside or the apartment next door. The voice seemed to be whispering directly to me, but I couldn't make out the words. My skin prickled, and I felt a wave of cold air wash over me despite the warmth of the room. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, turning on the flashlight and shining it around the room. There was nothing there. I checked the closet, the bathroom, even under the bed, but everything was as it should be. Just when I thought I had imagined the whole thing, I heard it again. A whisper, low and urgent, coming from the wall behind my head. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. It was still faint, but this time I could almost make out a word, help. And then a series of unintelligible mutters. I jerked back, my heart racing. I had never been one to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, but in that moment, I was convinced that something was wrong with this apartment. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something living in the walls. I turned on the lights, sat up for a while, and tried to calm myself down, but the whispers didn't stop. They continued throughout the night, faint but persistent, coming from different parts of the walls. I tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it. Old building, creaky pipes, maybe it's just the sound of the house settling. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next day, I called the landlord. She was an older woman, someone I had met briefly when I moved in. She was polite but a bit aloof, and I didn't know her very well. I explained what was happening, hoping she would have some logical explanation for the noises. She seemed unfazed. She said the building was old and that sometimes things could get a little creaky, but she assured me that there was nothing to worry about. Old buildings have their quirks, she said with a shrug. You'll get used to it. But I didn't get used to it. The whispers grew louder over the next few days, and they became more frequent. It wasn't just at night anymore. I started hearing them during the day too, while I was sitting on the couch making dinner, or even when I was in the shower. The voice was always faint, always just out of reach, but I could swear it was trying to communicate with me. The worst part was that the voice knew things about me. At first it was subtle, just the occasional mention of something I had done that day, or something I had thought about. It was like the voice was reading my mind, or at least pretending to. But then, one night, it crossed a line. I was sitting in the living room, trying to ignore the whispers when I heard it clearly. "You're not alone, you know," the voice whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine. I froze, staring at the wall, my pulse pounding in my ears. Who are you?" I asked aloud, almost whispering to myself. There was a pause, and then the voice came again, this time much clearer and much closer. "I'm right behind you." I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, just the shadows and the light from my desk lamp. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But every time I turned off the lights at night, the whispers returned. I started sleeping with the lights on, but even then, I could hear it, the voice, always lurking in the walls. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching me, listening to me, waiting. Then came the night that changed everything. I had just finished my shift at work and was exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open. I walked into my apartment, shut the door behind me, and collapsed onto the couch. For the first time in weeks, I was too tired to care about the whispers. I turned off the lights and let the darkness take over, hoping to finally get a full night's sleep. But the moment my eyes closed, I heard it. A loud bang, followed by a scraping sound. I shot upright, heart in my throat. The noise was coming from the wall, right next to the couch. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight to scan the room, but there was nothing there. I could hear the scraping again, followed by more bangs, louder this time as if something was trying to break through the wall. I stood up, trembling, and backed away slowly. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier. The whispers started again, but this time, it wasn't a voice. It was a growl, low and guttural, like something was trying to speak through a mouthful of gravel. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The sound was so intense that it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. I stood outside in the hallway, heart pounding in my chest, trying to collect myself. I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't stay there another minute. I ran down the stairs and out into the street, not caring where I went, just needing to get away from that apartment, from the whispers, from whatever was in the walls. I stayed at a friend's place that night, and when I returned the next day, I found that the apartment had been completely silent. The whispers had stopped, the scratching had stopped. Everything was normal, too normal. I didn't know if I had imagined the whole thing, if I had just been overtired or stressed, but I knew that I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed up my things and moved out within the week. I never told anyone what happened because honestly, I'm not sure I believe it myself. But I know one thing for sure, whatever was in those walls, it was waiting for me to leave. And now that I'm gone, I don't know if it's still there, but I do know this. There's no way I'm ever going back.
I never owned a full-length mirror. I live alone in a tiny apartment, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. The only mirror I had was the one above my bathroom sink. So when I woke up one morning and saw a tall antique mirror standing against my bedroom wall, I felt my stomach drop. I didn't buy this. I stared at it, my mind racing. Had I forgotten? Had someone broken in and left it? That didn't make any sense. My front door was still locked, the windows shut. And yet there it was. The frame was old, carved with intricate patterns, almost organic, like twisting vines or bones. The glass was warped and even. I should have thrown it out right then, but I didn't. Instead, I did something stupid. I walked up to it, and I looked. At first, everything seemed normal. My reflection stared back, same messy hair, same tired eyes. But something was off. The longer I looked, the more it felt like my reflection was watching me back, not just mirroring me, observing me. I lifted my hand. My reflection did the same. Perfectly normal. My reflection took a second too long to follow. I stepped back, heart pounding. The air in my room felt wrong, like the pressure had changed. I turned away, refusing to look at it anymore. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was standing over my bed, staring down at me. But every time I turned on the light, the room was empty, except for the mirror lurking in the corner. The next morning, I decided enough was enough. I grabbed the mirror and dragged it out into the hallway. I was going to throw it away, take it to the dumpster. But when I came back from work that night, it was back in my bedroom. I froze in the doorway. My brain refused to make sense of it. Had I forgotten? No. I knew I'd put it outside. I remembered the weight of it, the way my fingers had pressed into the wood frame. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone saw it in the hall and assumed it belonged to me. Maybe my land. Put it back inside. I forced myself to ignore it. But that night something changed. At around 3 a.m. I woke up. Not to a noise, not to movement, just a feeling. My room was too quiet. The air felt still, thick with something unspoken. And then I heard it. A soft, faint tapping. Coming from the mirror. My chest tightened. I didn't move. Then, again. A quiet, deliberate tap 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 like fingers against glass. Slowly, I turned my head toward the mirror. My reflection was awake. But I hadn't moved. I was still lying down hammering, barely breathing. But my reflection was sitting up in bed, staring at me. Then it smiled. A slow, stretching grin filled with too many teeth. I bolted. I grabbed the blanket, wrapped it around the mirror, and hauled it out of my apartment, not caring how much noise I made. I didn't stop until I reached the dumpster behind my building, where I shoved it inside and slammed the lid shut. I stood there, panting. The night was still. Too still. And then, just as I turned to go back inside, I heard a voice, muffled, distant, coming from the dumpster. "Don't leave me." I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, door deadbolted, lights all on. The next morning, I checked the dumpster. The mirror was gone. I don't know who took it. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. A soft, distant tap tap tap. And I don't look at mirrors anymore.
I don't talk to my neighbors much. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where people nod politely but don't really interact. But there's one house, the one across the street. I've never seen anyone go in or out. The yard is overgrown, the mailbox is rusted shut. It looks abandoned, except for one thing. The basement light is always on. At first, I didn't think much of I. Maybe someone lived there, just kept to themselves. But then I started noticing things. The light would flicker, always at the same time every night, 1:33 a.m. Sometimes it would stay on for hours. Other nights it would blink rapidly, like Morse code. And then, last week, something changed. The light went out. I don't know why, but it bothered me. It had been on for so long, its absence felt wrong, like something had finally ended. The next night it came back on, but this time something was different. There was a shadow, a figure moving behind the glass. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the more I watched, the clearer it became. Someone, or something, was pacing back and forth. Then, at exactly 1:33 a.m., it stopped and turned toward me. I nearly dropped my coffee. I was standing by my bedroom window, lights off, just watching. There was no way whoever was down there could see me, but I swear, it was looking right at me. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I did something stupid. I went to the house. The front door was locked, of course, but when I walked around to the back, I saw that the basement door was slightly open. I should have turned around. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I reached out and pushed the door open. The basement was cold, the kind of cold that sticks to your bones. The air smelled damp, like mildew and something rotting. And then I saw them. Rows of chairs, old wooden chairs lined up facing the same direction, toward the back wall, like an audience. And in the center of the floor, a single light bulb dangling from the ceiling. It was still swinging slightly, like someone had just brushed past it. Then behind me, a footstep. I turned so fast I nearly fell. My breath caught in my throat. The basement was empty, but the door was closing. I lunged for it, grabbing the handle just as it slammed shut. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I shoved my way out, tripping over the steps, sprinting home. I locked my doors, pulled my curtains shut. I didn't sleep that night, and at 1:33 a.m., the basement light went off again, but this time it didn't come back on. I don't know what I interrupted. I don't know who or what was watching me from that basement. But the next morning, the house was empty again. The chairs were gone, the light bulb was missing, and the basement door, wide open, like it was waiting for me to come back. I work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station just outside of town. It's a lonely job, mostly just truckers passing through, the occasional teenager trying to buy beer with a fake ID. Nothing too crazy, but there's this one guy. I don't know his name. I just call him the man who never blinks. He started showing up about 3 months ago. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., he walks in, buys a pack of gum, and leaves. Doesn't say a word, doesn't even blink. At first, I thought he was just weird. Plenty of weird people out here. But then I started noticing things. He always wears the same clothes, a plain gray hoodie, jeans, scuffed white sneakers. They never change, they never look dirty. He doesn't drive, there's no car, no bike, no footprints in the dirt lot outside. He just appears, and the security cameras, they glitch out every time he walks in. I asked my coworker Dave if he'd noticed anything weird about him. He just shrugged. "Dude's probably harmless," he said, "just some insomniac." But I wasn't so sure. Last week, I decided to test something. I locked the doors at 2:10 a.m., just for a few minutes, watched through the window. At exactly 2:13 a.m., he was there, standing perfectly still just outside the glass. His head tilted slightly, like he was waiting. I didn't move. He didn't either. We just stood there, staring at each other. His face was expressionless. His pupils were huge, swallowing almost all of his irises. The seconds dragged. Then, he raised his hand. Not a wave, not a knock, just a slow, deliberate motion, his palm pressing flat against the glass. I swear, for a second it felt like the entire building shook. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I checked the cameras. Nothing, just static. I haven't locked the doors since, because I have this sinking feeling that if I ever try to keep him out again, he won't just stand outside. He'll find another way in.
We were supposed to be back before dark. That was the rule. But time moves differently in the woods, and when the sun dipped below the horizon, we realized we were lost. It was me, Josh, and Riley. We'd grown up together, spent every summer exploring the forest behind Josh's house. We knew those woods, or at least, we thought we did. The plan was simple. Hike to the old fire tower, take some pictures, and head back before sunset. We made it to the tower just fine, spent maybe half an hour up there messing around, watching the sun lower in the sky. Then Riley said he heard something, a clicking sound. Probably just a deer, Josh said, but Riley frowned. No, it's weird. Listen. We went silent. Sure enough, there it was, a rhythmic click, 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 steady, deliberate. Not like an animal moving through the brush, more like something imitating an animal. We laughed it off at first, but then we started walking back. That's when we found the footprints, bare, human, leading in circles. My stomach knotted. Josh forced a chuckle. All right, now it's creepy. Riley was staring at the prints, brow furrowed. Who the hell is walking out here barefoot? The woods were too thick for it to be a prank. The nearest road was miles away. And besides, the tracks. They weren't normal. The spacing was off. Like whoever, or whatever, had made them didn't walk quite like a person. We should go, I said. The clicking sound was closer now. We picked up our pace. At first it was fine. We were still joking, still half convinced we were scaring ourselves for nothing. But then, the path started to feel wrong, like we were walking in circles. Josh muttered, "Haven't we passed this tree before?" I didn't want to believe it, but yeah, we had. A thick oak with deep scars along the bark.
I'd run my fingers over it maybe 15 minutes earlier. We're going the wrong way, Riley whispered. The air felt heavier, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else. Something rotting. That's when we saw the clearing. A massive tree stood in the center, gnarled and ancient, its bark carved with strange symbols, the kind that looked like they meant something, even if you didn't know what. And at its base, a hole, a dark, gaping maw into the earth. Josh swallowed hard. We need to leave. But Riley, he wasn't moving. He was staring at the hole, his breathing shallow. Then he whispered, "Someone's down there." My skin crawled. "What?" He pointed. I saw something move. I didn't want to look, but I did. The hole was just a void, swallowing light. But as I stared, my vision adjusted. A hand, pale, reaching. Then before I could even scream, it grabbed Riley's ankle. He let out a strangled yell, stumbling backward, but the thing pulled him down. Josh and I lunged, grabbing his arms, pulling as hard as we could. His eyes were wide with terror, his hands clawing at the dirt. Then we heard it. A voice. Soft. Wrong. "Come down. It's safe." But it wasn't Riley's voice. It sounded like him, but the cadence was off. The words were too slow, too careful, like something was learning how to speak. We pulled harder. Then, suddenly, Riley was free. We fell backward, gasping. The hole was silent. No hand, no movement, just an empty void. Riley was shaking. His jeans were ripped at the ankle, his skin covered in long, thin scratches, like fingernails had been digging into him. We didn't say a word. We just ran. I don't remember getting back. One minute we were sprinting through the trees, and the next we were stumbling into Josh's backyard, panting, covered in sweat and dirt. None of us spoke about it. Riley never told us what he saw in the hole, but after that night, he changed. He was quieter, always looking over his shoulder. His hands would shake when we walked past the woods. Then, a month later, he disappeared. Search parties combed the forest for weeks. No body, no clues, just gone. Josh and I know the truth. He never left. Sometimes when I dream, I see that hole again, and in the darkness, I hear his voice, soft, careful. "Come down, it's safe."
It started small, just tiny noises, little scratching sounds in the walls that I barely noticed at first. I live alone. Well, mostly alone. My cat Binks is my only companion. At first, I figured it was mice. The house I rent is old, the kind where you can hear every creak, every groan of the wood settling, the kind where you swear the air shifts differently at night. It wasn't until the third night that I realized something was wrong. I woke up around 2 a.m., not sure why. Maybe a dream, maybe instinct. Binks was curled up on my chest, which was odd. He usually sleeps at the foot of the bed. His ears were flattened, his tail puffed up. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine, not Binks's. It was slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere in my room. I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give me away. Slowly, I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned on the screen, letting the faint glow cast across the room. Nothing. But the breathing stopped. I stayed awake until dawn, every muscle tensed, eyes darting to the corners of my room. When the morning light finally bled through my curtains, I convinced myself it had been my imagination. Sleep deprivation does weird things, but then things got worse. The scratching in the walls wasn't just at night anymore. It followed me from room to room, always staying just behind me. I'd be washing dishes, and I'd hear it beneath the sink. Watching TV, it was behind the wall. Then the whispering started. At first I thought it was the wind, soft, unintelligible. But one night I pressed my ear against the wall and held my breath. I heard my name. clear as day. I shot away from the wall, my skin crawling. That night, I decided I needed to check. I couldn't live like this, feeling like my house was constantly holding its breath, waiting. I grabbed a flashlight, moved my dresser away from the vent cover, and unscrewed it. The air that rushed out was stale. Shining my light inside, I expected to see nothing but dust. But then I saw something move, a shadow shifting, deeper in the crawl space. My throat tightened. My mind screamed at me to run, but I stayed frozen, staring into the darkness. And then, eyes. Two pale, unblinking eyes staring back at me from the vent. I dropped the flashlight. My breath caught in my throat as the thing, whatever it was, began to move. Slow, deliberate shifting. I ran. I didn't even grab my keys. I just bolted out of the house barefoot, feeling the cold pavement against my feet. I made it to my car, locked the doors, and sat there panting, staring at my bedroom window. Something moved behind the curtains. I never went back inside. I called my landlord the next morning. He sounded weirdly unfazed, just muttered something about old houses and things that shouldn't be disturbed. They put the house back up for rent last week. I wonder if the new tenants have noticed the noises in the walls yet.